Khan is an actor, producer, screenwriter, and director. Recently an actor, I believe. And Khan became one of the most prominent film directors in Egypt during the 1980s wave of Egyptian realism I have here in my notes. Khan's cinematic opus to date include numerous award-winning films, including Darb al-Shams from 1978, Gone and Never Came from 1984, The Wife of an Important Man from 1987, and Dreams of Hind and Camila in 1989. Other more recent films include Days of Sadat, In the Heliopolis Flat, and the award-winning Factory Girl. We're also joined by Nadine Khan, whose film Chaos Disorder is having its UK premiere here tonight at 8:50. Graduating from Cairo's Higher Film Institute, Nadine has worked as an assistant director of many films, including Transformers for DreamWorks, and 4 short films, including One in a Million. And most notably, her award-winning debut feature film, Chaos Disorder, won the Dubai International Film Festival Mohr Arab Feature Competition, and having its UK premiere tonight. Khalil Joreige, who's the third filmmaker on the panel, is one half of an award-winning art and filmmaking duo, Joanna Hajatoum and Khalil Joreige, and they have produced an eclectic body of work over the past 15 years, focusing on their home country of Lebanon and the region more generally. Their cinematic repertoire includes the Lebanese Rocket Society, which was produced in 2012 and released by Soda Pictures here in the UK, Je veux voir starring Catherine Deneuve and Rabia Amroui, and A Perfect Day in 2005, and of course Around the Pink House, perhaps their most popular film, released in 1999. And their artistic works, of course, as artists, have been exhibited at museums and biennials and are held in international collections around the world, from the Guggenheim to the V&A and the Sharjah Art Foundation. And they've also produced numerous publications, worked as lecturers, and sit on the board of the Metropolis Art Cinema in Beirut, and are also co-founded Aboud Productions. So that's a lot of stuff. And this panel is moderated by Brian Whitaker, who is a former Middle East editor of The Guardian, the author of Unspeakable Love and What's Really Wrong with the Middle East, and also a recent book which is called, I've forgotten the name, Arab is About God, which you can buy on Amazon now. And he also runs albab.com. And I'm hoping that, usually when Brian's on a panel there can be some controversy, but who knows, there won't be controversy. But I hope you enjoy, and I'll hand over to our chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Amar. I think probably the way to start this off is to have a chat with each of the 3 directors we have here, just talk a bit about the film in this festival.
Sound, please.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Mohamed, your aesthetic has been described as reinvigorated realism, seeking direct documentation of everyday life in Cairo, beyond the walls of the studio. I think the Factory Girl film is probably a very good example of this, that it's a very rich picture of working class life in Cairo, especially female life in Cairo, centered around a clothing factory. And I suppose the key feature in the film are the entry of this man from a slightly higher social status and the kind of frisons that causes within the factory, and also the issue of unmarried pregnancy, which comes into the film and the way society responds to that. But I suppose really the most striking thing is that there are so many women in the film. Would you say that's the main thing of interest?
Definitely. I would like to say, I tell stories, basically. I want to tell stories. So I tell stories about human beings. Whatever issues come out while telling the story, it's not necessarily coincidental, but must help the story. Not trying to be a social reformer or commenting on the state of affairs. I want to tell my story within a real situation, a real place. So that, to me, it becomes believable.
So you actually took over a little street in Cairo to make the film?
I didn't take it over, all of it, but I mean, I took some of it.
Right, okay.
You know, but with the cooperation of the people,
Yeah.
only just.
And you're using mostly ordinary people in the film. It's not the big name stars and that sort of thing.
There's no stars in the film. There's only the exception of two good actresses who played the aunt and the sisters, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, they're all newcomers. Yes.
How did that work? Work well?
It worked well with the believability of the characters. I mean, you believe the girl is a working class girl. You believe the girl is. You believe them all. You know, and I think even there's a mix between girls who work in that factory and girls who are not actresses or semi-actresses. Some of them even stage directing, you know, and all this. But they wanted to be in the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But they contributed by what I can call the chemistry between the girls, and that makes also a big step in the believability of the girls as a whole.
You said you're trying to tell stories and not make a point. Although it's a very feminine film in lots of ways, I wouldn't really call it feminist, would you?
Yeah. I leave this to others to say whatever they like. Because I mean the whole thing, I hate the question is, what are you trying to say? You know, I'm not trying to say anything. I'm telling a story, from beginning to end. And I hope that what I felt, somebody will share it with me. Or it will make people think, it will make people react. That's always very nice.
And just tell us a bit about the reaction to the film in Egypt.
Well, positive. I mean, as I said, it stayed 15 weeks. I mean, for a film of that sort, without stars, to stay for 15 weeks, it shows that there was an interest in the film. And it was a new experience for me to do a film with funds and all this. I never done this before.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time. And it was successful in that aspect. It made its money back, which is...
Was it an expensive film to make?
Well, it's not a cheap film to make with this. It cost around 5 million.
5 million
Egyptian pound.
Egyptian pound.
Which is in Egypt at the moment. Films will go between 2 million to 6 million. The normal films, but some of them goes, of course, to 10, 15, and 20 with stars. You know.
Okay, Nadine, you made another film about real life in Cairo. Harag wa Marag, one of these wonderful rhyming Egyptian titles, which kind of, it's sort of onomatopoeic as well, with chaos and disorder. And the whole action of the film takes place in this very bleak sort of district of Cairo, where nobody seems to be doing anything productive. Everybody looks pretty bored. It's rather a brutal sort of society. And it's also quite surrealist. It's realist and surrealist at the same time, I felt, because you have these kind of strange things happening, like the loudspeakers making a sort of commentary, and also you've got the visually it's a bit strange. You have these sort of slightly washed out colours. Would you like to just sort of explain a bit more about that?
Yes, I tried Harag to create a world of its own. I don't think it's connected only to Egypt. I think it's connected to the Middle East in general. And in this world I created its own language, its own morals, its own rules. I created the whole system. And part of it is the media. That's why there's this loudspeaker, that they have their own kind of media in the place. And for me it was all I was trying to create a reality or a reality parallel to a reality that we all know, by pushing it to a certain extreme, by creating a place that you know very well, but there's something different in it. You know those characters, but not really. Also, talking about the colors, about being washed out. There was no contrast in the film, no saturation, and I really meant it because the whole place is just as it is.
And it's kind of desolate but populated, or teeming with people actually. And
Yeah.
you, unlike the Factory Girl, this was a specially created set, wasn't
Yes,
it?
yeah.
Will you
Yeah.
explain why you found that necessary?
I wanted to find a place with a very specific architecture, and with the space where with the open space, with the square where everybody gathers and where everything happens.
Because you need a space for a football match because
Yes.
because people have got nothing to do. And football is really very central to the life of the whole
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
Lots
Yeah.
of ways.
Yeah.
But can you just describe the sort of setting in case people haven't seen it? I mean,
Mm.
these kind of modern. It's not like the old Cairo alleyways that.
No, it's actually the set is based on a real location that exists in Cairo, and it was a compound built during Nasser's era, and it was built for the foreign engineers working in the electricity company. So it was built all villas with a certain architecture, and then through years it started turning into a popular place, and the people that started living in it are different, not related to the electricity company anymore. So it started created of this compound, but turning into a slum area. So it had a very specific architecture.
And there's kind of rubble strewn around in some places.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then these trucks that deliver things,
Mhm.
like the water is brought in by truck, then another truck arrives with the gas,
Mhm.
and another truck arrives with vegetables and one with
meat,
sweets.
sweets,
And so
juices.
everything is having to sort of come in from outside because they're not actually generating
Mhm.
anything
Mhm.
at all within the community.
Mhm. Nothing happens.
And then you see these, everybody seems to be sort of brutalizing everybody else. And, you know, you're starting with the kids who are running around and getting slapped all the time by
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
right up to the top of this man the big man who has a secret that he wants to keep from the rest of the community.
Yeah, yeah.
So you were using, again, you didn't have stars, you were just
No.
using ordinary people.
Yes. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, how did that go? You had them day after day doing these things?
Yeah, I only shot 3 days in the beginning that were in real locations, and this is the interior of the houses.
Mhm.
It was in real locations, and then I built the set, and I worked. I filmed for 4 weeks in set, and I filmed with the same people, same extras. I had around 500 to 700 extras on daily basis.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Were
And
there people with nothing else to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I insisted that the same people come every day. So after a while, really they started living in that place and started putting their own input in it, and it started to become alive. So this world somehow became alive, and I think that is very clear in the film.
Yeah, I mean, some of the crowd scenes, you don't necessarily feel everybody is sort of acting because you get a crowd and then suddenly some kids charge right through the crowd doing something totally sort of extraneous to what the story is.
Yes,
which is
yeah.
nice.
I was sometimes filming them without them knowing that I'm filming at that moment. Because they existed in the place for the whole day, so they're living in it. So and it was a bit of a documentary.
They start behaving in these very natural ways that they normally do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got this loudspeaker and all these kind of surreal things happening as well.
Yeah.
And so, what about reactions to the film?
Publicly, I can't really say in Egypt because the film was in the cinemas in a very sensitive timing. It was right before the 30th of June.
Tell us about you put up the idea when 2006 was it?
Ah yes. Yeah, in
And what-
2006. It started, I was working as an assistant director on a film with Yusri Nasrallah, and we were filming in Lebanon, in a refugee camp. And the idea started coming from that I discovered that there is a guy that is in charge of the Coca-Cola distribution in the camp, and somehow he blackmails the people, somehow, yeah. And then it developed into connecting it with slum areas in Cairo, in places in Syria, and I started connecting it and creating this world of taking. I took some details from Egypt, from Lebanon, from Syria, and I created a certain world.
And so you put the script or screenplay to the Egyptian authorities?
Yes, that was in 2010.
So that's just before the
revolution.
of Mubarak.
Yeah.
And did the Mubarak people
They didn't like
think it
it.
was a good idea?
No.
It really does show a sort of grim picture of Egyptian society.
Yeah.
I can imagine they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that would be before the election, the last election of Mubarak.
There was supposed to be a presidential elections in 2011, but then the revolution happened. But in 2010, the censorship stopped the script. They didn't give me the approval to go on with it. And I never had an official reason.
And it's
No.
not. I mean, it's not a directly political film. It's just
No.
a portrait of
Yeah.
really sort of a very unfortunate section of Egyptian society.
Yeah.
So how do you get it done in the end?
After could I just
Yeah, go on.
highlight something? I don't think that it's related only to Egyptian society, and from the response of audience all around the world, I think I believe more and more it's true, because everybody from different countries, they relate to the film very easily. Any such community with those economic and social circumstances exists in a lot of countries, not only in Egypt or the Middle East. And that's why I insisted on creating a certain world. I think the only thing that connects it, or the most thing that connects it with the Egyptian or with Egypt, is the dialogue, that it's in Egyptian slang. But other than that, I think it's here and there.
So how did it get approved in the end?
After the revolution in 2011, straight away, I took the script again to the censorship, and I said, I think I need the script to be done, and I took the approval. But I think I was lucky, because I went straight after the 18 days. If I would have waited a bit more, I wouldn't have gotten the approval, because the censorship, I think even nowadays, is worse than before.
Were the censors actually the same people, or had the staffing changed?
I'm not sure about that, but the Ministry of Culture was different at that time. I'm not sure about the censorship people. I can't say. Yeah.
So let's move on to Khalil and Around the Pink House. This is a film you made back in 1999, I think, so it's quite a long time ago compared with the other two. The Pink House is a rather sort of splendid old building in Beirut, which has been occupied during the Civil War by families who've been driven out of their villages. And then when the war comes to an end, the house is sold to a new owner who plans to build a shopping mall and God knows what around the facade, and sets about evicting the people who've been living there. And it could have been rather a sort of depressing story about an eviction, but actually it acquires a certain sort of life to it, because the people explore different ways of resisting.
Yeah, each one has his own, I would say, direction and problem with the reality. What is interesting for us is the fact that they were trying to find each one of the character was having a kind of solution. But the fact is, when there is a real estate project, it changed completely surrounding. It changed completely the relation with people. It's Actually, the same even today. Do you think that you have to help the factories and the companies, or you have to help people? Even on a policy in Great Britain or in Lebanon, the same kind of issue are still present. So for us, it was more to try to think with the situation, to show the complexity of this situation. So, this was our main difficulty from the beginning. To try to layer all the situations and after to mix them all together.
So we've got three different films in some ways. Mohamed, how do you see Arab cinema developing from here? In terms of, we've got a very interesting sort of political situation going on. Not necessarily a positive one at the moment, but where do you place the Arab cinema within that?
Well, I'm always optimistic. I think it's the cinema in general, whether in Egypt or anywhere else, has its ups and downs. We are in a bit in the down a bit, but I'm sure it comes up. There's a lot of young people with ideas, and I think always when havoc or happens in their world, it creates art, and it creates people thinking, young people coming in with ideas, and I think the Arab cinema is not, I can talk about the Egyptian cinema more, it's not only the mainstream that caters for the majority of the public. There are a lot of young people with ideas, and they try to make, they call it independence or whatever, but they try to make serious filmmaking. And this makes me optimistic. Because if we have I could say we have 2-3 films a year, different, trying, and some of them succeed, some of them don't. That's for me is fine. And then you started to have, even Lebanon, there's a lot of, civil wars or whatever, results in a lot of good art coming out. Unfortunately, out of misery comes good art. And when you corner people, they create more. This is my feeling.
Nadine, would you agree with that? Are you going to disagree?
I don't know. I don't know. No, but I think anyhow there is definitely a movement that is happening in the cinema world, and I could also speak out Egypt more than anywhere else in the Middle East. And let's say in 2012, 2013, there's around 6 films, around 6, I think, if I'm right, I'm not sure about the number, what they call independent, that were screened in film theaters in Egypt, and that is already a huge step that took place, and I think it's still going on, it's growing and growing.
By film theatres you don't mean sort of ordinary cinemas?
Ordinary cinema. Yeah. We only have now, and it's new, one film screen that screens I don't know, different mainstream films or foreign films or whatever. Only one screen in Egypt.
And where do you place cinemas? We have DVDs now that people can watch at home.
Yeah.
How do you see the future of cinemas?
In cinemas?
As opposed to people watching on DVDs on computers and TVs?
I think it's the same all over the world. It's somehow trying to find its balance. It's changing, but it's still the theaters or the film theaters still exist, and it still have people going to it. Of course, now with the political and economical problems, it gets affected, but still it has its own place. Yeah.
And Khalil?
situation in Lebanon is a little bit different from for example, Egypt. For example, the market in Lebanon is not sustainable for a filmmaker. Like we have 3 million tickets sold per year in all the cinemas, which is nothing compared to Egypt.
But that's less than one Lebanese person going to cinema once a year.
Yeah, it's a poor country, and there's a lot of DVD and things like this. So as market, it's nothing. We cannot count on it. There's no institutional money. Like we not even try to get money from any institution in Lebanon. First, because we don't want to recognize them, and second, because if they want to give us money, we won't get it before 4 or 5 years. So after that, we have to generate our own systems. In terms of money and production, that means that there's certain kind of film that will be made with really no money, even if there is stars in it and things like this. Like when we made the film I Want to See, that was released in London, also, even if we were making a feature film with Catherine Deneuve, the film cost less than $300,000. So it's really nothing. It's really depending how you want to generate a system that allows you to make such films. Of course, after distribution will change a lot. Because, for example, you cannot talk about Arab cinema. For example, I don't think never a Lebanese film came into a theater in Egypt.
No, Nadine Khan is one.
Oh, yeah. One of the two.
No, I think also Caramel did. Both, I think.
Yeah, because it was produced also by Saad Sabah in a kind of Egyptian company.
It was very popular in Lebanon, but I don't think it did very well in Egypt, did it?
No, I don't. I don't know. I can't really say. I don't know, but I know Hala Alwin. It was screened, maybe in 2 screens or something, and I think it did well for 2 screens because people. I think there were audience for it, but I don't know about Carmel. I don't.
But even sorry, I want to think about the notion of popular. What's the meaning of popular for me? It's not about, for example, having some audiences at the launching of the film, because you can have today in Lebanon you have some TV program, a series. The last episode will be made in a Blu-ray and shown in a cinema, and they call it the movie. But it's had nothing. It's the last episode of something. You know. But you see, but they will get the money they want it for the communication, prestige, and things like this. Is this cinema? It's popular for me came not about the success in an audience at the time, but in the history, in time, and also from where it comes. You were talking about storytelling. If I adapt in Lebanon in the 70s and in the 80s, you had Fouad Sharafuddin who was taking films like James Bond film and adapting in Lebanon, really, shot by shot.
Lebanese James Bond.
Yeah. Fouad Sharafuddin. Yeah, it was very nice, but not popular. But not popular for me, because it was really how you borrow a narration, bring it, trying to impose it here. A popular thing is something that can grow from a certain place, be syncrecy with the places, and generate some influences after. Not in terms of economical value. Okay, we know that some of the films will be like, for example, a popular film for me, Egyptian film for me, is Mumia. This is a film that after 30 years is still shown every year in Beirut. Still, you see, and this is a kind of audience you never take into account. For me, we have to think about the meaning of an audience at a certain moment, a market. When you make a film for 10, okay, Perfect Day, no, not Perfect Day, Around the Pink House was a big success at the moment of its launch. It was sold to more than 10 TV channels and things like this. But if I take another kind of film where we decide not to work with a TV broadcast from the beginning, but it's still shown every month, every week somewhere in Lebanon. You see the difference.
Mohamed, how do you view popular cinema?
I just want to comment something.
Go
about
ahead.
Lebanese
Do,
cinema.
yeah.
I mean, there are storytelling films. There is Falafel, there is West Beirut, and there are films that tell stories. Am I right? And they're not all James Bond.
No. They tell story, but for me, telling a story in Lebanon is by itself one of the main issues. What is a story and what kind of narrative? In terms of narration, for example, causalities. If I take a normal story, police story in Lebanon, like I kill somebody, I go to jail. Okay? In Lebanon, you don't go always to jail if you kill somebody.
Story about not going to jail.
Yeah, but this becomes quite absurd in the Western things. And if you want to adopt it in Lebanon, it would be science fiction. So you have really to think about here in terms of narration, what is your background, what is the kind of what kind of story? Can I have a hero? What's the name of my hero? His name is Mohamed, Ali, Mustafa, or Joseph. You see, by itself, it's already a color, a context, a situation, and this is what makes this situation very interesting. In art, the artist managed to show the complexity of the situation, the sophistication of the situation. In film, sometimes, as Godard was saying, it's an art that has qui a le malheur d'être une industrie, that are unfortunately an industry. So you always have this context between, on one hand, trying to simplifying situation, and on the other hand, trying to try not to make it so simple, but to show the complexity. So this is why, for me, narration is not always an easy thing.
Yeah, I don't totally agree with you. Because I go back and say the films are telling stories, are entertaining, and it depends whether it's subtle or not in wanting to raise an issue or not. But for me, this is the basic. This is what attracted me to make films. And then talking about the Arab cinema, and besides even Lebanon, Morocco, there's a lot of films coming in. Tunisia has difficulty a bit, but there was a certain stage where there was a lot of, like Nouri Abu Zaid and others trying to make something. So in general, I'm optimistic. I mean, there are, even our names will be gone. I mean, there are still young people coming in, and they're affected what's happening in the world, and they want to express it, not necessarily in completely art form. It could be simplified, it could be, as I said, telling a story or entertaining, but has something in it. Has something. I like to make films about human beings. I mean, is it a crime to make films about human beings? It's not. It doesn't have to have banners saying something. It's about the human being. Whether he's suffering or whether he's happy, both are interesting.
Oh, yeah.
This is how I see it.
No, I take the example of Factory Girl, which is a pretty simple story, but there's a lot of very acute observation in it about Egyptian life and that sort of thing, and so that gives it a certain complexity and depth, even though you might think it's very simple. There is actually a lot of richness in it.
Yes, but it comes from either experience in the writing, or experience, I don't want to flatter myself, but experience in seeing things,
Absolutely.
Age-wise, I mean, it's nothing good.
Do you want to make some observations on this?
About what exactly? About which part exactly?
Any particular thoughts?
No, I think I've already said what I think. I'm also an optimist, maybe in a different point of view, but I see that there is a lot of production happening, and I think that's the most important thing. whether we agree, disagree, like or not, these are different point of views, but in the end, there is production happening, and it's getting more as in numbers and as in where it's being screened, and I think that means we're heading somewhere good.
You know, looking back in the past, you know, there was a certain mystique about the cine camera. You know, that it's required a crew and all that sort of thing. You know, now all you need is a mobile phone to take a moving picture. Do you see that changing things? You know, because you have the countless videos of sort of 2-3 minutes being posted on YouTube and so on, often showing dramatic events. How does that affect cinema as a whole? And is the key still what Mohamed said about, you know, the observation, that you've got somebody who's really making very acute observations? Or how do you think it's going to work?
It's already working. It's been now for years. The whole technology thing has been now for years, but still, film has its own place, its own technique. The way you use these tools, whether it's a mobile camera or a cine camera or whatever. Yeah, in the end, how you use that tool, and I think that's where the artist comes. I think so.
Yeah, the point.
Yeah.
And because I mean, yourself, you're talking about the cine camera, the digital, mobile, and all this.
Tools.
But then, even in filmmaking, as it is, I mean, sometimes I'm making a film and who are all these people? There's all 60 of them, right?
Yeah.
Now I can do it with 10 people, right? But then there is that human factor. Now these 60 people who are in this industry, they have homes, they have children, they have to earn money. So I mean, it's a complex thing. I mean, you want to do it freely more, but sometimes you're responsible for all these people. And this is I feel the magic of the whole thing, you know. Go ahead.
No. The thing is, I think that even in the 60s or in 70s, there was already small productions. People doing film in 16 millimeters or even in 35 with 2 persons, 3 persons. So the production part didn't change a lot. It's really a decision of the filmmaker and of the kind of films they want to do. But in terms of what changed really is maybe the characteristic of a film after its distribution, what we call catalog, the catalog of a filmmaker. Let's just imagine, because around the Pink House, the DVD distributor paid several $1,000 to make the DVD. In the second film, he decided not to put a minimum guarantee because the market of the DVD was going down. And now you have even sometimes to pay to make a DVD. So there's a kind of economy that is changing. The fact that you are renting films, that you try to fight to leave a film in a theater. And for me, theater is something very important, because for me, the place is important. Sometimes you go in a theater and the condition of screening is worse than in your place, in your house, where you have a home system, surround system, and things like this. But when you are in your place, you are not confronted to accidents. You don't feel that you are in a common place. The common is very important. It's something where a lot of things happen. In Lebanon, we have our cinema that's called Metropolis Cinema. That is something we really fight to be able to show different kind of films. And this is why things like this are important, because suddenly it's not that you are hearing us, but you can see the person next to you and wonder what is he thinking, feel a little bit about the mood. It's something that is you cannot planify.
Right, time to open it up for questions, I think. Anybody like to ask something?
Hey.
I'm very curious, Nadine and Khalil, I'm very curious, and Mohamed, I'm very curious about the systems of censorship. Nadine, you said that really it was just that after those after the 18 days, you went quickly, you were able to get approval. In Lebanon, is there also a system of censorship that says you have approval to make this film, or what is the systems of censorship like? And in terms of Factory Girl 2, I mean, what was the approval, or were there any kind of difficulties with the approval, or it just went through very quickly? And why was that?
No, I answered mine too. I've already said about my situation.
Okay, in Lebanon there's a censorship. The censorship is run not by the military structure, but by the minister, the interior minister. So by the military. Okay. It's a trend today. It's been a trend for the past 20 last years to be that I'm censored. It's a good publicity for the film. As soon as a film is censored, people want to see it.
I think it's the same here.
Here
in Egypt.
So even sometimes you make you can even put a small insert of something that you know that the censorship would cut it just to be able to say I'm banned.
Then how do you get it made? It's banned.
Censorship is people, so you can always negotiate with them.
Okay.
Small payments, the censor?
We send a fake scenario. This is something that, but at the end, if you send a fake scenario and you want a visa after to be able to show it in cinema, and they want to censorship, they will make a comparison with the first script and the last script. And if there is difference, you cannot do anything to be able to have the new one. But censorship changed, the visa changed, like in the 60s and in the 70s and the 80s, for example, erotic films were allowed. Today they are not allowed. We can show old films, but erotic films, but not the new ones. You see, for example, because you can have a film of a political, like, okay, we have several discussions with the people in the ministry. So last time I was invited to come and have a coffee. This is the official way to invite you to have a discussion with them. You sit on a couch, and the couch is old. So what happened is that little by little you go down. So you are under the desk. So you see, you have your knees here. And you start to have discussion. So the fact is, you never have to accept the critics that they are going to do. Yeah. So you have to attack them. For example, what happens? Da Vinci Code, for example, in Lebanon was forbidden. But by whom? It was a complaint by a group of Muslims that were trying to say we should censorship this film by respect to the Christians. You see? But we have strange, I'm gonna just give you one. It was a woman, the director of the censorship at that time was a colonel. She was talking about a TV program where she censored something in sex in a car. She said this. She was like a man was driving, the woman get down and make obviously it was off screen kind of blowjob. Okay, and after she took a Kleenex and wipe her mouth and throw it outside, like disgust. She said, you see, she didn't like it. This is why I said. Okay, we can make it fun, but for example, Around the Pink House was censored. What was censored is the small kalim zifr.
The swearing, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what we made is, after that, one of the copy of our film has been stolen in Yemen. Okay, so we went there to see who stole our copy. It's called Around the Pink House. And what is funny is that we were supposed to re-put the small footage into the frame, into the copy that was stolen, and they forgot to do it. So the censorship gave us back this small piece of some bits. Swearing, and this is the only part that we kept of the film in the other one. So in a way, the censorship managed to save part of our film.
Mohamed, I'd just like to...
Brian, if I can just make one comment on this. Censorship also in Lebanon is, as you said, Khalil, is cultural and religious. So it's not just state institutions that actually censor cultural production and mainly films and drama and news it's culture, general culture, and it's religious groups that actually interfere in censoring. And in many cases, this type of censor comes through critics. So some cultural journalists would write a piece about a film or a cultural production, basically highlighting certain aspects in that film which does not agree with what he believes, and then suddenly a wave of criticism in the country takes place and it becomes underwritten censorship. And just a quick note on the James Bond Fuad Sharafuddin notion. Fuad Sharafuddin was the Chuck Norris of Lebanon and not James Bond.
Just briefly, Mohamed, I'd just like to talk about censorship and your film, because I may be reading too much into this, but one thing that struck me is that it actually depends on censorship for the story to work. Because you get to a point where there's a man and a woman in the same apartment, and then the viewer kind of assumes that sex is taking place, but obviously it's not allowed to be shown, but you sort of assume that it's taking place. When in fact...
I wanted the audience to think it might have taken place.
Exactly, but they're able to think that because you don't show it and because there is censorship, and so they sort of assume that it's being censored out, when in fact there is nothing to censor out.
Yeah, but I would like to talk also about censorship in general.
Go on.
Because there is no specific points that we should take care of on this. It's very vague and general. Religion, politics, and whatever, So we learn how to go around things. And then, you meet also, like my friend met a lady censor. I also had a lady censor once. Who, that was the film Wife of an Important Person, which take events during the Sadat regime, and we had the okay, and then she called me back to her office with the writer, and she said, why don't you let it Nasser's period? I mean, how could we change that from Sadat period to Nasser period? It turned out that during the Nasser regime, they confiscated some of our family's land or something like that, and she was really bitter. But and then we said, no, we cannot do that. So she said, well, here is a phone number, they want you to call them. We said, okay, we'll call them afterwards. She said, no, you can call them now. So we called them, the guy, when she said the name was, he said he's not in his office. So she said, he's on his way, right? So we sat on this table, and then came that guy from Mabahsan al-Dawla, what do you call it, Mabahsan al-Dawla?
State security.
Mabahsan al-Dawla.
State security.
Yes, state security. And he said to us, why do you want to make this film? Right? So I said my point of view, and Rauf Tawfiq, who wrote it, said his point of view. And he said, well, tomorrow you come to us, you meet the big boss. We were very scared, to tell the truth. But we went the next day, and he turned out to be really, I must give him his credit, a very intelligent man, better than the reports, who wrote the reports about the film. He was open-minded, and he said, no, forget about these reports. He said there's only one thing. There was vandalism during the riots. See? I said, okay, I'll burn the car. And that's what I did. The only thing I did in that film, I burned the car. Actually, that film could not be done today in Egypt. But I mean, I burnt the car, right? And then he said, well, show me the film when it's first out, in the private screening and all this. And without the help of the security, well, they could have never made the film. And we went to show him the film. So there is that guy who a policeman who studied criticism and all this. I have a scene where the hero, he's a policeman, comes in and the fridge is empty, right? And he's having a fight with his wife. So he said, the fridge is empty. You mean Egypt? I was going to be sick at that time.
Okay, well, yeah.
Can I just make one comment about Factory? Mohamed, you said films about telling stories, but I make one small observation. Is about the stories that are not told. The woman in the hijab in the film, who I think, my impression is that she's the one who had the positive pregnancy test. So in your film, I think it's the stories that are not told, and you leave it to the viewer to analyze. So that's just whether this is right or wrong. I got that impression.
I'll tell you.
Okay. The other comment is it, I don't want to be pessimistic, but is it pointless to think about distributing Arab films in Europe and the USA before we can distribute Arab films in the Arab world? The example of Caramel, and where do we go now, having not been distributed in Egypt and the rest of the Arab world?
What's the question?
Should we be thinking of distributing Arab films internationally before we distribute Arab films in the Arab world?
No, the Arab world comes first. Our audience comes first to see what we're trying to say. And then again, it goes, wherever it goes, it's good to go wherever it goes. But I mean, this is not, as far as I'm concerned, this is not my major concern.
Even as a Lebanese citizen, if I want to go to an Arabic nation, I need a visa that is much more difficult to get than to get a French or a UK visa. Okay, so this is a kind of metaphor of cinema. You have sometimes your film that will be shown during 1 or 2 weeks in Tunis or in Algeria. Or what happened in the last 5 years changed a little bit the situation in the Arabic region because of the help of the Gulf in terms of productions, especially Dubai. Sanad is now up in Sanad is in Abu Dhabi. 1 year is yes, 1 year not, 1 year is yes. So we still wonder what will happen. And Doha started very well and crashed, you can say, in a very spectacular way this year. So we can imagine that these places were really helping Arabic film to be able to be done. Because what happened in the same time, all the international and the foreigners' grants were disappearing. So basically, when I made Around the Pink House, I was managing to get more than €1 million at the time, which was a lot from outside Lebanon. And today, if I manage to get more than €400,000, if I make an addition of all the sums and all the grants, you see? So it's just, they compensate what was happening in the West, especially, and allowing filmmakers to be able to do their films.
Yeah, I think we have a major problem with distribution in the Middle East in general. Major problem. And I could also say even for mainstream films, depending on the star, there's a lot of criteria, and also in the end you got the problem of distributor being the cinema owner in Egypt. We have that problem, and the producer at the same time. Now it's starting to change bit by bit, but still there's a long way to go. But I think at this moment I could talk about myself that in the end I need my film to be seen. And if I find a distributor that would allow me to do that here or in the Middle East or anywhere, I would do it. So in the end, one of the major problems in this industry is the distribution section. Until now, we're not trying. We couldn't solve it really. Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time now.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. I mean, it's a very
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you.